Welcome to Flex Live. We are living in an era where everyone is trying to optimize, accelerate, and automate their communications, all the buzzwords. But in that rush for efficiency, we often lose the one thing that actually connects with an audience, and that is our own authentic voice. And so today I am thrilled to be joined by someone who has spent her career uncovering the truth in the loudest rooms in Washington, from the White House press briefing room to news bureaus she built from the ground up. Jacqueline Policastro has seen the evolution of media from every angle, and today she's going to help us navigate it. So we're going to unpack how to cut through the noise, why your unique perspective is still your greatest asset, and how to tell a story that actually resonates in the age of AI. So Jacqueline, welcome.
Well, thank you. I love this topic because my career is sort of one long lesson in what makes people listen and what makes them trust you. So for nearly 20 years in television news, I had to find the lead under deadline and ask hard questions, translate the complicated events for a really broad audience. And so today I get to do that work from the other side, and I'm so glad to be here with you.
You're here to do it and excited to learn so much from you. And so we'll kind of start back at the beginning. You built news bureaus from the ground up. You covered the White House, you covered the Fed very closely. And in those environments, every second counts. So how did the kind of urgency, every second counts mentality shape how you view communications today?
Well, okay, Whitney, you know that a deadline is a ruthless editor, and I think that's often a really good thing. And so in TV news, we have to combine this mix of speed and rigor. And those things have to coexist together, right? And so when we're going through a story, we're identifying a lead, we're separating what we know is a confirmed fact from an assumption, and then trying to anticipate what's going to come next. And like big picture, making this useful for an audience. And also, aside from that, so thank you for the intro, I built a few television bureaus, and that work, gosh, spans everything from business development, technology, doing all the hiring and management, and then, of course, the journalism. And so, in that arena, the speed comes after you've already made the preparation and the systems are built. And that's very similar to building a business like businesses that we run today.
Very nice. You know, you mentioned that you built the bureaus from the ground up, but you also did the coverage. And something that we find when working with our clients is that assumptions happen, right? So you walk into a story, a lead, whatever it is, and you make an assumption of what you think the story is going to be. How do you and how have you approached asking the right questions and doing that research so that you're telling the correct story versus the one that you thought you wanted to tell in the first place?
This is such an important question for our business. Clients often come to me with a topic or an issue or sort of like a collection of facts,
Yes.
but it's never a story yet. And so my instinct is always to ask, what does this mean for a person's life? Or does it affect their family, their job, their community, maybe their health? These are all sort of the different kinds of topics, right? And then I go in with the reporter's questions. So what's changed here? Why are we doing this now? Why are we talking about this now? What's actually at stake? And so my job is to keep asking those questions until we're able to move beyond what the organization or the CEO came to me thinking they wanted to announce or whatever audience they wanted to reach. And we're really getting to understand what that story is. And I am a big believer that when the stakes are high, you want and need someone in the room asking those questions before a reporter does.
Completely agree with that. You know, we talk about the media as this monolith, right? But you've emphasized that the media looks very different depending on which side of the camera you're on. If you're on the business side, the bureau side, you're reporting, you're a producer. And local news itself is its own animal. And I always say hammer things home, everything starts locally. That's where the most important work happens. What is one thing that you see with clients that they get wrong about local news? I know the flashy stuff is the morning shows and the evening shows and things like that, but really, what is the value of local and what do people get wrong about it?
Local news is not a smaller version of the national news. And so the most important word in local and when you're pitching local is the word here. Why does it matter here or to these viewers, the ones that are here right now with us, right? And so that is the biggest takeaway. And then a press release isn't a television story. Television needs people and video, and the most important thing, access. And so if you're pitching, but you're not giving a reporter access to your CEO or your company or your organization, it's not going to be a really great story. And then a national story becomes local only if you can show that it has local impact in the place that you're trying to get coverage.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And it's also what you started with of local is not just a smaller version of national. There's a lot of confusion when people see, like here in Dallas, Fort Worth, we have Fox 4, and people think, well, that's just Fox News in Dallas. But you have talked to me about the fact that that is not true, that there are local Fox affiliates that are not affiliated with the National News Bureau.
Yeah, this is a really important point. And I have educated folks from people inside local communities all the way to the White House about this. People hear Fox and they assume it's referring to one big newsroom, right? But there's sort of three separate things. There's the National Broadcast Network, and there's the local Fox affiliated station, and then there's the Fox News Channel, right? So a local affiliate will carry Fox network programming, but it typically has its own local newsroom, and it might even be operated by an entirely different company. And so we need to think of affiliation as a programming relationship. It doesn't necessarily tell you who runs the station or who even owns the station. And in this context, Fox News Channel is a separate national cable operation. And what that means for practitioners like us is that the audience, the booking process, the story format, all the editorial priorities, they're going to be different. So you can't just pitch to Fox as though it's one editorial operation, because it simply isn't.
Absolutely. And we work at Flex. We work with clients that are in the advocacy and public policy space, and they're doing some big, flashy work around the country. But we also work with a lot of mission-based organizations that are in local communities and metroplexes like Dallas, Atlanta, even the DC metro area. And one of the struggles that they have is they look at media and they say, how do I get in? How do I tell my story? How do I stand out as this nonprofit doing great work in the community, but I don't have the story that's going to capture the attention of the evening news. And one of the things we've talked about is what you mentioned earlier. A press release is not a TV story, but access and giving them something maybe to use on a slow news day that's an evergreen story might be a good entry strategy for some of these smaller organizations.
Yeah, I mean, it's also about connections and making the time to meet up with reporters, to know who the news directors in your community are, to know who owns the stations in your community. The time to make that connection is not when your story is ready to go, it's before that time. And this is a human business. And so it's important that we recognize that and that we're available to be a trusted resource for our community news organization.
Great. And we also hear there's a stereotype, right? That reporters just want rage bait, that clickbait, that we want the story that's going to go viral. But it's been my experience that there are reporters that really want to do the deep work. They still exist out there, and they also want to tell that great human interest story. You mentioned it's human. We're all people. Talk to me a little bit about just where that still exists in the news.
Well, there's no question that newsroom capacity is under pressure. And when these information gaps open up, it actually gives leaders an opportunity and then also a responsibility. And so we have the chance to become trustworthy primary sources for great reporters. And that means on our end, and when I say our, I mean businesses, community members, the nonprofits you just mentioned, we need to be publishing the documents and showing the data that we have and making really smart people available. And we have to be willing to answer difficult questions and not just get into this mentality where we're repeating the preferred message of our organization. And owned media, so the things that we produce on our own on the business side, can be really valuable when it's giving people more evidence and not just more content. And when you get to that point, reporters are going to pay attention because they're going to see you as that trustworthy primary source.
is a point we want to hammer home to everyone we talk to on a regular basis.
It's true for all of us. It's sort of what we're doing here right now, right? We're talking about our business and letting people see and hear us and trust us and know that we have the best interest of our clients and also the greater community and even our news community partners. Those things are all top of mind for us.
Yeah, well, that's a perfect segue into a topic that I feel like it is the flashy thing, it is the scary thing, it's the unknown, and that is AI.
I
And
was
we're
going to say, is it
definitely
AI?
AI. And as professionals, you run the risk of losing trust when you are providing people AI driven content or things that maybe are not as natural or authentic to yourself. But also, there's a lot of fear of AI taking over the news and AI slot becoming the articles that is read by people as they're perusing, and people not knowing the difference between what was written by a reporter who's in a newsroom, did the on the ground work, and then an AI bot who kind of compiled a story based off of other information. Um, and you and I had an opportunity to talk before about the opportunity for AI to be a tool to make all of this better in the long run. So, where do you feel is the line between, especially when it comes to the news, AI as a tool and then AI becoming your voice?
Well, I advise people to use AI for speed and don't just hand it your microphone.
Yes.
And so it's really good at producing language, right? But that's not the same thing as knowing what deserves to be said. Uh, I don't outsource my judgment.
Yes.
So
Line right there.
yeah, when we want to know what's true, what's sensitive, which is really important in our business,
Yes.
what matters or why only someone with a lived experience would notice something. And an example of this is I can remember being out covering a local news story and hearing the sound of the wind chimes outside a murder victim's house. And I wrote to that in my story. AI can't do that. I
No.
remember the feeling inside Hillary Clinton's campaign headquarters in the middle of election night, or the energy inside the White House when the big COVID era decisions were being made. And all of those details come from being there. AI wasn't there with me. So it can imitate structure, but it will never replace my observation, my experience, and definitely not my judgment. And I think that experienced professionals like us are going to get more value from AI because we already know what good looks like. So we're sort of lucky.
Yeah, that's a really great point. We are very lucky. I wrote a little bit earlier this week about arguing with AI because AI also has the tendency to become an echo chamber and just tell you what it thinks you want to hear so that you're happy with it. And making it think kind of be the devil's advocate for you at times because you always want to have that human judgment as a piece of whatever tool that you're using. So,
Yeah. I mean, when it comes to AI, I just want to be clear. I'm not scared of AI. In the television business over the past 20 years, I started out editing on tapes, physical tapes, and then moved to mini DV tapes, and then moved to digital editing. And we started using satellites for our live shot technology, and then we moved to what are called TVU packs, which utilize the technology of cell phones. And now we can use AI to generate headlines, right? Using new technology is absolutely a part of every business, and it's important for us to keep the ability to discern what's good and what's right and what's true, but to also utilize the technology to advance our industries and our organization.
I love every bit of that. And I think what I love you said is, you said that with confidence. You're not afraid of AI because you trust yourself. And like you said, you know what good looks like. You have high expectations. You know how to leverage technology and a tool. That's really something that I feel like leaders need to be doing, whether it's a leader in a newsroom or a leader in an organization that is seeking out news media coverage, how they project that confidence and as a leader create a culture around the implementation of AI that gives people the same type of feeling. What's one thing that you feel like if you were going to talk to a client or a leader about that discernment and how they can make sure that that trickles down through their organization as they're generating content, as they want to remain that trusted source for producers and reporters?
It's not one size fits all. It has to make sense for your business and your strategy. Even if you look at the overall news landscape, different news organizations are using AI in much different ways. I recently worked with OpenAI and I was at one of their events, and you could hear the difference between how, for instance, Axios is using AI and the Boston Globe is using AI. But part of the reason that they're able to use the technology differently is because they're leaning into what their brand is and how their organization works and what kind of financial implications it has for their org and for their viewers, right? And so it is not one size fits all, and it is absolutely worth continuing to monitor, research, understand, talk to your staff about. And I think important to train especially less experienced team members who grew up with this technology and some of the other fundamentals so that they're able to be as discerning as we are. Again, I can't stress enough that I believe we're lucky. I grew up in a time where I didn't have a cell phone and I didn't have internet inside of my house. And so it is a different perspective, and we have to learn from our peers who have different levels of experience throughout this process and rollout. But I'm a big believer that the technology is only going to get better and faster. And it means that we need to change the way that we're looking at the speed and the decisions that we're making, and be willing to consistently look at how we're running our business on the weekly based on how the technology is moving.
Absolutely. And this is going to sound a little off topic, but something you said really resonated. I have found that those of us that did kind of grow up without a cell phone in our hand and then had to learn, we learned all of these different advancements, in real time, and had to be flexible and adaptable and willing to try something different, has made it a little easier for us to embrace AI. And like you said, in a one size or not, it's not one size fits all fashion versus my teenager who he's going to kill me after this goes up. Honestly, he'll say things like, "You could do that with AI. You're doing that. How did you do that?" And it's almost like a taken for granted, less skilled gap there with some of the people you'd think would have the most skill. And so I just wanted to emphasize, I do agree with you that we are lucky in the way we've grown and come to approach technology from all different perspectives.
Absolutely. It's not an easy button. And even simple things like starting out in a newsroom in a community across the country when I didn't have a GPS, right? That means you have to learn where, when you're going to breaking news or going to a story, you have to learn where the building is, where the story is, what parts of town have different ebbs and flows for different types of stories.
Yes.
Um, just because you have the technology in your pocket doesn't mean those things aren't worth learning. It's how can we use the technology to make things faster so that we absolutely can learn and do more, but not to replace the natural knowledge and curiosity that being part of a community, part of a business, an organization brings us.
It's the authenticity of the story that you end up telling. If you never leave the newsroom to tell the story, you're missing a lot of those pieces, the wind chime you mentioned, or just the personalities and cultures out in a community or in an organization, in their work, the water cooler space and the kind of conversations that they're having or what they're innovating on. Um, so you talk a little bit about what you do now.
Okay.
Kind of that aha moment that maybe helped you say, gosh, I've learned all of these things, throughout my career. I now can go back and help other leaders figure this out.
Yeah. The aha moment was realizing that I had been practicing high stakes communication strategy from the newsroom side for nearly 20 years. And sure, I was interviewing presidents and cabinet officials, congressional leaders, just people at the center of every major national news story. But through that, I saw that really brilliant people, some of the most highly accomplished people, could still struggle to explain what mattered the most. And
Yes.
so the newsroom, it really trained me to impose this sort of hierarchy on complexity. You're always finding the lead, you're translating the jargon, trying to anticipate what kind of scrutiny you're going to get and figure out what can actually be verified. And maybe the most important part, remaining really calm when the facts are moving fast.
Yeah.
And yeah, those aren't reporting skills. They're strategy skills. And so through building my business, I discovered that I love using that skill set to help people before the cameras turn on.
That. You know, there's also, you mentioned, some of the most competent people need this type of support and prep and, strategy behind it. We also have both worked with clients who kind of think, nope, I've got this. No news, or all news is good news. Even negative attention is great attention. And in the modern age where everything lives forever and it's not just a blip in time that's going to disappear, it's going to follow you. Talk a little bit about how you coach leaders on building that personal brand and trust and consistency as they're putting out public messages and engaging.
A lot of leaders aren't ready yet, and they're doing so much. And so it's a real opportunity to get ready. And you have to do the work before you go out and speak publicly. And being careful doesn't require you to be vague. You just need to get the facts right. You have to, again, prepare for those really difficult questions. Talk about what you know and be honest about the things that you don't know. Because ultimately, when we're having these kinds of conversations, public conversations, the goal isn't to sound perfect. It's to be really clear and to be credible. Whoops, see, and to handle things as they come at you. As silly as this might seem, these kinds of things happen on live TV all the time. We've all
Yes.
seen them, right? And so we want to be able to be calm and credible and ultimately really useful to our viewers.
I love that. And kind of another a little bit off topic question, but the social media, like X, formerly Twitter, has become some people's news outlet. I mean, they're getting kind of sound bites in however many characters we're allowed to post now. And a lot of leaders and organizations are like, oh, I got to get this out on X. I got to get it out on X. I got to get it out really quickly or it's not going to matter. How do you coach people on how to balance the message and getting it right versus the urgency of getting it out on social media?
It's funny that you asked me this question because just this morning I was quoted in a PR news article about this very idea. And here's the thing, journalists, uh, we're going to your social media accounts, not necessarily for the facts. We're going there to verify the feeling, the background, who you are as a person, what your credentials are, the what we call the color of the story. And so I wouldn't say that social media has to replace the owned content from your organization, but it should absolutely give reporters a glimpse of why you might be the best person to tell this story. And so when you start using it that way, it really allows reporters to connect with you. And I have talked to lots of clients and work with lots of clients who have gotten media coverage because of the work that they're doing on social media. You don't need to be first there. You need to show who you are and why people should believe you and trust you there on that arena.
And you're just killing it with the clip line. That was perfect. There's some clients I'm sending that one to.
All right.
Thank you. That was great. Um, so leaders, like you mentioned, sometimes they're not ready. Sometimes they need time. If you could give one piece of advice to leaders who are hesitant to even speak because they don't want to get it wrong, what would that advice
Mhm.
be?
There's a couple of important things you need to do before you go into a news interview. And the first one is that you really need to think about why the other side should care. Don't think about why I should care as the CEO or why my organization cares. Why does the audience care? Once you can answer that question in sort of like a clear sentence, then you know what to lead with. And so a message is not going to be successful just because you said it or you went on the news and told a reporter what you think. It's going to be successful because folks understood it and they could connect with it. And you have to think about what should be different for the audience after they hear from you. Are they going to understand something new? Are they going to feel something new? Are they going to do something? There's so many priorities and people come to us for help, right? That ultimately they want people to act. Well, we have to be able to get that headline right first
Yes.
before we engage with the media. And we have to be able to understand, again, that this isn't something we do on a whim. This is something we prepare for.
That's fantastic advice. And speaking of advice, what is a habit from the newsroom that every communicator, you, me, a founder, a CEO, CFO, a comms lead, what is that habit that you think we should all adopt today?
This is a good one. Going with write the headline first. So if you can't say the point in a clear sentence, you're not ready to communicate it. And then after you write the headline, figure out what supports it, explain it, and go back to how I think of this as a newsroom question, the who cares and why. If you have someone in the room at your organization that is consistently challenging everyone in the room and saying, who cares? You're going to be better off for it.
Absolutely love that. Thank you. That's actually great advice and something I need to adopt with our team at Flex and also get better about sharing with our clients.
You have to be ruthless about it. Even
Yeah,
when I was managing my large newsrooms, it was a question that I consistently asked. And we even put practices in place because of that question. For instance, we made a point to try not to cover legislation that we knew was never going to be voted on. Because what does that really do for your viewer? It gives you information that you're never going to be able to use. So just because a lawmaker sends out a press release touting a piece of legislation that's not going anywhere, that doesn't make it news. Right. And so if you use that ruthless, who cares questioning with everything you do, you will definitely be stronger.
that is fantastic. Thank you. Everyone needs to hear that.
Yes.
And this has been such a great conversation. When we first talked to prepare for this, I knew I could probably get 10 conversations out of this. So thank you so much for all these insights and your valuable time. Where can people find more about you, follow your work, learn more about your company?
Well, you can follow me on LinkedIn at Jacqueline Policastro, and you can follow my business on our website, policastrocommunications.com. And I'm always ready and willing to connect. I love meeting new people and, spreading the word about what we do. And so thanks for asking that question.
Yeah, and we'll make sure and put all the links in the comments on YouTube and on social media so people can click and link to you directly and follow you. I follow you, get great insights on a regular basis. So I'm excited for everyone else to learn more from your great work. Thank you so much for your time today. And to everyone watching, stay tuned for the next edition of Flex Live.
I loved being here with you. Thank you.